Aurora gripped the juddering yoke tightly as the swirling red cosmic winds of the drift enveloped the ship. She had made thousands of jumps in her time, but this just never got any easier. Her unease was exacerbated by her cargo, a crew of half a dozen grubs, cutthroat scavengers, whose demeanour made her nervous. These weren't your usual salvagers, she thought. This was a rough crew. Just think of the payout, said Spider, who reclined lazily in the co-pilot's seat behind her. But this attempt at reassurance did little to help. Aurora powered down the E-drive, and in an instant the ship dropped out of the drift, bringing their destination into view. Her mouth fell open as she got her first look at the once thriving but now shattered world of Praxis 17, a planet ripped open to the core, titanic chunks of its former surface now suspended in orbit. The grubs in the hold started to prepare for landing. They were all armed, heavily armed. This wasn't normal. What the hell is going on? Aurora asked with a whisper. What could they even be salvaging down there? Trust me, Spider whispered back. You don't want to know. Hello and welcome to The Bad Spot, an actual play podcast in which I, Matt Risby, and I alone will be playing the preview edition of Ironsworn's Starforged. If you've not heard of Ironsworn, it's an absolutely incredible tabletop role-playing game designed by Shawn Tomkin and released back in 2018, I think. What sets it apart is that it's primarily intended to be played solo or cooperatively. That is to say, without a GM, without a pre-planned adventure, or without even any vague conception of what the first scene is going to be. It is my absolute favourite type of RPG in that it is fiction-led, and it's up to the players to interpret prompts and randomly generated ideas to form a story out of thin air, basically. As a result, playing Ironsworn is really special, and it becomes more of an experience than a game. Now, the original Ironsworn takes place in this kind of pseudo-Viking low fantasy setting, but I will be playing through Starforged, which is the upcoming sci-fi remix of the same game. It's currently on Kickstarter, and as I am recording this, has absolutely destroyed its funding goal. And if you back the project, you immediately receive this very preview edition PDF. And calling it a preview edition is kind of a ridiculous thing because it is incredibly polished. But this kind of generosity from the creators is no surprise, as the original game was and still is completely free to download. And I'm not talking about a 20-page micro RPG. It's a nearly 300-page, fully illustrated book. It's incredible. I'll stick a link in the notes if you want to check it out, and I heartily recommend you do. In this first episode, I'm going to work through the world building and character creation aspects in what most RPG fans and players will know as a Session Zero. Now, in Ironsworn, prep is considered very much part of play and involves interpreting prompts and rolling up some random elements to fill in enough detail to get started. There's nothing in depth, there's no long complicated backstory or lore. All we do is we sketch in some details and we play to find out. Now, in the past, on other RPGs, I've spent weeks and months planning, writing backstory, working with my players to come up with their characters and fit it into the fiction. In Ironsworn, typically you'll complete all of that work in an hour or two, and we're going to see if we can do it in even less time than that. In Starforged, the characters we play are spacefaring heroes whose people fled their home world in an event called the Cataclysm. They have found a new home among the stars in a galaxy known as the Forge, which is divided into 4 broad regions. The Terminus is the most explored and populous. The Outlands is a dangerous frontier. The Expanse is home to a few isolated settlements but almost completely uncharted. And the Void is an unimaginably vast unknown. The character I'll be making today will be a spacer, trying to make their way through this dangerous galaxy. I'll take on perilous quests and swear to see them complete no matter what it costs. And it will be fun, I promise. But before we create our character, we must build our world, and in order to do that, we must first complete an exercise called Choose Your Truths. A truth is basically a statement about the world of the game. In this exercise, we're presented with 14 categories and a series of truths about each. We then pick the option closest to the world as we see it, and that becomes true about our setting. This is a very, very easy way to set the tone and background to a campaign, whilst also providing a great deal of variety in the options. Now, it's important to note that when it comes to choosing your truths, you can customize the existing truths, or you can completely make up your own. It is up to you. But I want to showcase the game as much as I can, and I'm going to be using just the truths as written, and I'm going to provide a little bit of spice by, instead of choosing them, I'm going to let fate decide and roll the dice, having them generated randomly for me. So, the first truth tries to get to the core of why our people had to leave their homeworld and asks us, what is the truth about the cataclysm? There are 3 options, and I'm just going to roll the dice and see which one is presented to me. Okay, I rolled a 72, which gives me the option, everything fell apart in an age of chaos. So, essentially, our homeworld folded in on itself and everything went wrong all at once. It also gives you the option to add a little bit more detail to it, and it gives us a little table to roll on to see what was the catalyst for the crisis. And the options it gives us is the rise of a fascist power, the loss of key resources, a pandemic, or a dire religious prophecy. Now, maybe it's betraying my rather dim view of humanity, or maybe it's just the fact that I've lived through the last 15 months. But I feel like I want to pick all 4 of these things to be true, because if the last year has taught us anything, it all generally tends to come at once, and you can't just catch a break. And I like the idea that our home world, where we used to live, everything just compounded, everything went wrong, and we just had to get out. Everything fell apart in an age of chaos. The next truth concerns the Exodus. Now, the Exodus is the literal voyage of how we reached the Forge. Now, there's 3 options again, and I'm just going to roll up and see what it gives me. Okay, I rolled a 90, which says mysterious alien gates provided instantaneous one-way passage to the Forge. That's very cool. It fits with the idea that perhaps we were leaving in a bit of a hurry, and the cataclysm forced us out of our homeland and didn't really have much of a plan. There's a little bit of supplemental text which says, our ancestors found a strange metal pillar on our homeworld's moon. A map on the surface of this alien relic detailed the deep space locations of the Iron Gate's massive devices, which powered artificial wormholes. With no other options, the Exodus ships fled through the gates and emerged in the Forge. I really like that. These little bits of extra text just add a little bit of flavour. Again, you can ignore them if you want, but I really like that. I like the idea that maybe there is a network of these iron gates everywhere, and we just happened to slip through one, and here we are. So that's how we got here. Okay, so what is community like amongst the peoples of the Forge? Let's roll up and find out. So 51 says, dangers abound, but there is safety in numbers. Many ships and settlements are united under the banner of one of the founder clans. I instantly like that option. That provides a lot of faction interest in our galaxy. There could be situations where I'm trying to curry favour from one side or another, or play them off against each other. It's just an interesting dynamic if there's set factions in a universe. I'm not going to fill in any detail of what they are now, but we just know that to be true, that there are founder clans. We don't know how many there are, but those clans unite certain groups of people in certain places. Gives us a lot of flexibility to come up with interesting stuff should we run into any of these founder clans. Okay, the next truth concerns iron. Now, in Ironsworn, and the name may give this away, you will swear, literally swear, your vows on iron to complete quests for people. And how that happens is like a little custom or a tradition, and it's important to know how the people of the Forge do that in this world. So let's roll up and see what we get. 35. 35 is iron vows are sworn upon totems crafted from the enigmatic metal we call black iron. That's interesting. So that instantly gives us a resource that's rare that we can use. We can come up with perhaps some kind of black market trades for this resource. is a little bit of supplementary text which says black iron was first forged by a long dead civilization. That's cool. So maybe it's something that is traded as artifacts. Maybe it's hyper valuable. Also says it's resistant to damage and corrosion, can be molded using superheated plasma at specialized facilities, and the Ironsworn carry weapons, armor, or tokens crafted from black iron and swear vows upon it. So yeah, my character is going to have a bit of this black iron. I don't know what they're going to have at all, but there's so many quest ideas that you can come out with based on some of these truths. And the book's great because it gives little quest starters for each thing. In case you're stuck, you won't be lacking for ideas or options when you play this game, because if you can't think of anything, you can just roll something or use a starter or tinker it however you want, and you'll be off and running. Okay, the next truth concerns law and order. So what's the state of law and order in the Forge? Let's roll up and see. 7 says, much of the settled domains are a lawless frontier. Criminal factions and corrupt leaders often hold sway. Marvellous. I enjoy Wild West tropes as much as the next person. So having a kind of like lawless, Borderlands, frontier, expansionist feel is right up my street. In the little bit of extra text, it says a few communities are bastions of successful autonomy, but many are corrupted or preyed upon by petty despots, criminals, and raiders. I do enjoy petty despots. Also a great name for a band. Okay, what's our next truth? Our next truth is religion. What is the state of religion in the Forge? 29. Our gods failed us, we left them behind. So God is dead, there is no religion. Which, is pretty clear cut. What else does it say? It says, most now see religion as a useless relic of our past, but the search for meaning continues, and many are all too willing to follow a charismatic leader who claims to offer a better way. So, secure in the knowledge I can start a cult if I want to. That's always nice. I think that's cool. So it doesn't completely write it off. There might well be remnants or vestiges of old religions and old gods and old customs, but day to day, it's not something that's practiced. So I think in that first truth, when we talked about the cataclysm, we said that a religious prophecy was part of how everything fell apart. Maybe there's some vestiges of that still around. Who knows? I guess we will find out as we play. So there's no god in the Forge, but is there magic? That's the subject of our next truth. Let's find out. 78. 78 gives us unnatural energies flow through the Forge. Magic and science are two sides of the same coin. Interesting. So it's prevalent. How prevalent do we want to make it? I mean, we don't want everyone kind of shooting lasers out of their eyeballs and being kind of generally superpowered. But I think they're definitely real. Everyone has probably seen hard evidence of these people that exist. There will be probably very few people who don't think they exist. But I think what I'd like to be true in this game is that whilst rare, mystics are very dangerous and perhaps can't control their powers, maybe. And people might seek these mystics out to do good, and rarely does it work out like that. So I think they're a feared group for good reason, because they're very powerful. So the next truth concerns communication and data. So how do we share information? Let's see. 63. 63 says, information is life. We rely on a guild of spaceborne couriers, the Heralds, to transport messages and data across the vast distances between settlements. If we are leaning into Wild West tropes, then having essentially the Pony Express in space fits really, really well. I really like the idea that, you can't just send a message instantaneously to someone. They have to wait for it. One of the big things about Starforged is that it is a kind of retro future, and technology is not like hyper advanced. It is very much that kind of dirty, grimy, functional future that we see in, kind of Firefly and Star Wars and things like that. So yeah, we're going to have Space Pony Express running information between settlements. What's special about them? Could they be the most daring pilots? They have to be trusted to get data between settlements quickly and safely. Maybe they're protected. Maybe there's a whole industry of mercenaries whose whole job it is to protect heralds if they can keep up. And also nefarious individuals or groups who might prey on the roots of the heralds and, try and steal information, use it, extort its value, that kind of thing. I like that. Heralds, very cool. Okay. What's true in our world about medicine? What kind of state is medical care in? Let's see. 40. 40 says, to help offset a scarcity of medical supplies and knowledge, the technicians we call riggers create basic organ and limb replacements. Always nice to know that I can get a spare black market organ or extra limb. But maybe, so let's say like if you got wounded or sick, would you probably just die? I don't think so. I think medicine does exist and you can get treatment and you're likely to survive most things. But if you needed serious care, then you would have to really seek it out. And not every settlement will have someone who can provide that. So I like the idea of these kind of traveling riggers or people you might run into in a space station somewhere or in an anchorage, and they might be able to hook you up with what you need. I like that. Okay. Next truth concerns artificial intelligence, AI. Do we have superpowered artificial sentient beings? 82. 82 says artificial consciousness emerged in the time before the Exodus, and sentient machines live with us here in the Forge. Yeah, that's fine. That doesn't mean that they have to be super advanced, lifelike, Westworld style, androidy type things that are indistinguishable from humans. It can just be a talking box that does stuff, pilots ships, performs basic functions, but is conscious. I'm perfectly happy with that. I don't have too many ideas of the kind of character I want to play, but there is something cool about having a little robot buddy. And maybe I've just seen Silent Running too many times. Yeah, so that's the state of artificial intelligence. Okay, war. What is war good for? In the Forge, we'll roll the dice and find out. Okay, so 96 says, war never ends. Talented weaponsmiths and shipwrights craft deadly, high-tech tools of destruction. Dominant factions wield mighty fleets and battle-hardened troops. So, war never ends, does it? Do I want to be in a constant warfare game? I don't think I do, but it does say dominant factions. So maybe the clans that we established earlier are constantly in conflict. Maybe some of the clans hold more sway, more territory, more power, more access to shipyards, factories. Maybe the wars are between them. The clan wars, we'll call them. Not the clone wars, the clan wars. It's very different. It's not that different. But what we'll say is, it's different for now. But yeah, I don't want to be constantly fighting. Ironsworn is very interesting when there is combat because of the way it plays out. But I don't want endless combat after endless combat. And I don't want to be just sucked into kind of war storylines. But it's definitely there. There are long-running conflicts that happen in the background. And I might get close to them, I might not. But they are happening. That's true. Okay. How diverse is life in the galaxy? So, 12. 12 says, this is a perilous and often inhospitable galaxy, but life finds a way. This game has a really great system for generating creatures, and I think this truth allows us to explore that a lot. I'm really looking forward to landing on a planet and rolling a few dice to find out that the dominant species there is a 9-legged cat with a beak. And that could be a friendly cat with a beak, or I could be in real trouble. But I think this one leaves that open to come up with some fun stuff and be eaten by it. Okay. Precursors. Now, precursors are the ancient civilizations that went before the people who fled to the Forge, before us. Now, what is true about precursors? 22. Over eons, a vast number of civilizations rose and fell within the Forge. Today, the folk we call grubs, who are scavenger crews and audacious explorers, delve into the mysterious monuments and ruins of those ancient beings. Cool. I like that. I really like the idea of scavenger crews and audacious explorers delving into ancient sites. That's very cool. I think That actually sounds like the kind of character I might want to play. And yeah, they're called grubs. That's interesting. So they kind of look down on, maybe? Like they're kind of a lower class, but maybe it's work that isn't seen as particularly honourable. Raiding tombs, robbing graves. But hey, it's work. You got to do what you got to do. Yeah, that's cool. I kind of like that idea. A grub. Should I play a grub? Let's see. Okay, last truth category is horrors. Just looking through the art of the book, and the art in the original Ironsworn is pretty amazing. It's kind of really evocative, stark, black and white art. But for Starforged, they've gone with a completely different style, full colour art by a wonderful artist called Joshua Meehan. Just look at this guy. Look at this lonely dead space boy. All he's doing is looking for a friend. He's come in and he's like, hey, does anyone want to part? No? Okay, me neither. So yeah, horrors then, I guess. Am I going to have to kind of fight off space zombies and skeletons? I don't want to, but let's find out what's true. Okay, so 85 says, the strange energies of the Forge give unnatural life to the dead. Oh dear, this sounds bad. The Soulbinders are an organization sworn to confront these horrifying entities. Okay, so there is dead stuff out there, and it doesn't sound like a great deal of fun, because there's a group of people called Soulbinders who have to deal with it. Now, Soulbinders, who are they? Could they be the remnants of those religions, maybe? Is it a Spanish Inquisition style purge of dead things? That sounds interesting. Soulbinders. If we ever stumble across the dead, I guess we're going to find out more about it. That's the joy of this game. You play to find out. So, those are our truths. So you can see very quickly we have established some really solid background for the world. We don't have to stick to all of those things, but if we just consider all of those truths every time we do something, every time we explore a new area, then it allows us to maintain this kind of consistent tone in the game. And I absolutely love that about this game. You know, most of the time when you play an RPG and you sit down with a group, the first thing you want to do is discuss what the tone of the campaign is. Is it going to be kind of like wild fantasy riding dragons, or kind of gritty, kind of cyberpunk or whatever? And it's really important to maintain a tone. And I think that this exercise of choosing your truths is one of the cleverest ways that I've seen an RPG do it, and so succinctly as well. Okay, let's create a character. My character. This is who you're going to be spending time with, so he better be interesting. So, it's a pretty simple process, and there's about 10 or 11 steps to it. I don't have much of an idea of the kind of character I want to play, but, you know, we'll see as we go. Another bit of killer art here. Look at this little guy here. Look at his little snuffly face. He's called a Rockhorn, I believe. And I'll kill the suspense for you now. I'm not going to have an animal companion. Having played the first Ironsworn, spoiler alert, it's pretty hard and pretty punishing. Now, I know that if I took this little guy on as my companion, I would probably try and give him a little belly rub, and he would gore me to death instantly. So, as tempting as it is to have an animal companion, I'm going to kind of pass. Now, it's a shame because there's some cool ones in Starforged. There's like a Void Glider, who is a kind of a big bat pterodactyl thing that kind of hangs out behind your ship, and there's a psychic cat called a glow cat, and I realise now just saying them, I want all of them, but it's a dangerous path. I don't want to tread it. So, okay, first thing we're going to do, we are going to sort out the asset cards. Now, there are no classes in Ironsworn, but there are assets. Now, assets are printed out little cards. You get the print and play with the preview or the digital edition, and if you back the whole hog on Kickstarter, you get physical cards, kind of poker-sized cards, and they represent various things about your character. Some are tangible, some are like your ship's upgrades, any support vehicles you might have, or companions like the little rhino boy. But then, importantly, there are assets which are called paths, which are sets of skills that kind of define your character. Now, they're kind of broad, but you can kind of mix and match them to make kind of very interesting characters. And if you're not sure, as always in this book, you can roll randomly and get an idea. And there's paths for every type of character you want to play. And when you mix and match them, you come up with some really interesting combinations. But, just to give you an idea, if you wanted to play a smuggler, for example, you would probably pick the two paths, courier and scoundrel. So we're going to pick two now. I did say during the truth section that the idea of playing a grub, a look down upon scavenger maybe, Tomb Raider-y type person, is kind of appealing. Why is that appealing to me? I do not know. In the original Ironsworn, there was a supplement called Delve. It had a really cool mechanic for delving dangerous sites, which was really fun. So I kind of like that idea. So yeah, I'm going to pick two paths. And the paths I'm going to pick are scavenger. I think that's, a given for someone who works in this line. But then also, I'm going to take the path explorer. Why have I done that? Well, let's find out in step 3. Step 3 is create your backstory. What brought me to the point where an explorer would be a scavenger? Well, the idea that I've literally just come up with is, what if my character he worked for kind of like an institute. Now, an institute like a geological institute or a university or something like that, where their job was to survey the galaxy, go out, find stuff, chart it, tell us all about it, get a slap on the back. And maybe it was a very prestigious institute, and maybe I wasn't doing it alone. Maybe it had kind of like a senior, like a professor or a mentor or something like that. Yeah, let's say I had a professor that went with me everywhere, and, I was their understudy, and they have understudies? They don't have understudies. I was their underling, and I would go around and we'd kind of explore things and chart things, and it was kind of cool. And maybe we specialized in precursor stuff. Maybe we specialized in those ancient civilizations, and maybe we found, here's an idea, maybe we found one of those iron gates that we established in the truth that we used to leave the home world and get to the forge. Yes. What if we found one of those iron gates, or what might have been an iron gate, and what if my professor disappeared through the gate? What if that's true? That would certainly give my character something to do. They'd be looking for them all the time. They'd be searching for them and want to know what happened to them. Okay, here's an even better idea. What if the professor and I found what we thought was an iron gate? We kind of went to investigate it, and there was like a blinding flash, and the professor got sucked through the gate and disappeared. Then I kind of passed out. It was all a blur. And then I woke up back at the institute, and I was told that the professor had been, given leave, and I was being discharged. Thank you very much for all your hard work, but we won't be requiring your services anymore. No explanation, no nothing, 0. Is that cool? Is that a good idea? Is that interesting? Is that what drives my character through space? Am I searching for the truth of what happened to the professor? Am I looking for the professor, literally? And why am I a scavenger? So it's hard to make your way in the galaxy. Maybe I've got to keep the ship flying. Maybe I've got to keep my head above water, and maybe I use my wits to compete with the other scavengers who are perhaps more kind of roll your sleeves up and get your hands dirty, kind of low down dirty grubs. But I'm kind of elevated above them because I'm use my smarts. Maybe people hire me to get things that are perhaps harder to find. Maybe I have a reputation for finding lost things like ancient kind of artifacts and stuff. I don't want to be Indiana Jones. I'll make that clear right now. I don't want to be space Indiana Jones. But yeah, someone who is kind of living a double life in a sense. Someone who was working for a prestigious institution and now finds themselves down with the lowest of the low. Yes, I think that's interesting. I think that gives us pretty decent scope for galactic fun times. Let's see. Okay, so that was step 3, create a backstory. Step 4, write a background vow. Now, vows are very important in Ironsworn. They are what we swear when we agree to do things, and they are sacred. Now, each character will have what's called a background vow, which will be something that just ticks along in the background, and it will be something that will most likely not be featuring session to session to session, but it'll be something that you're always working towards. It might be something that you never pay off, that you never complete, that you never finish, but it's just always there driving your character. Now, if what happened to the professor happened, then would my background vow be to find the professor? Or should we keep it a little vaguer than that and say to discover what happened to the professor and unlock the secret of the Iron Gates? That sounds good to me. That is my background vow. Not going to think too much about it. Let's move on. Okay, step number 5. We are going to board our starship. So we're going to have 4 assets when we start. We have 2 paths, which we've already picked, Scavenger and Explorer. We have a starship as default, and then we get to pick one other. So you have to have a starship because you've got to get about the place. And you can't just be, catching space buses. So we're going to take the starship asset card and we're going to give it history and we're going to name it. So what is the starship's history? Now there's a little table to roll on, but I think I'm just going to pick one because there is one option which is kind of obvious given the backstory we've come up with, and that is the option that says granted by an organization or community. So I'm still flying around in the Institute ship, the Explorer ship. Did I steal it? Did I steal it? Yes, I stole it. I've decided that I was discharged and I was like, I can't believe this is happening. I'm pretty sure I saw the professor suck through an iron gate. I'll tell you what, I'll hop on this ship to find out. And yeah, so maybe I'm still flying around in an Institute ship, which is very obviously an Institute ship. It's not built for what I'm using it for. It's an exploration surveillance vehicle. It's not particularly fast or well armed. It's a functional exploratory vehicle, and that's what I'm flying around in. So I think that makes sense. Granted by an organizational community. Granted in inverted commas because I half-inched it. Okay, next step for the starship is envision it. So what does it look like? I think it's got like a big dome-like glass cockpit, one that allows me to see everything in a kind of panoramic view when I'm exploring new planets, new environments. Maybe it's glass underneath where you sit, so you kind of get a glass bottom boat vibes, so you can kind of see what's down there. I think that it's very boxy. It's powered by pretty heavy engines at the back. It's got kind of fold out wings, like the wing doors on cars that go up. I think the wings are a bit like that, kind of seagully wings. I think it's orange. There's no real reason it should be orange, but it's just my favourite colour. It's kind of like bronzy orange, I think. I think there's still some markings from the Institute on it. I'm not fooling anyone, but I've tried to get some of them off. And yeah, there's a couple of tables to help with rolling up ideas for your starship. And one of them is, some features, some kind of obvious visual features that it has. Now, I'm going to pick 2 off here. I'm going to roll one randomly, and I am going to pick one because there's another one on here that just makes perfect sense for the character we've come up with so far. And the one that makes perfect sense is that navigation logs contain coordinates to locations that do not or should not exist. I really like the idea that the ship is still full of equipment that perhaps has seen better days, that is used for analysis and research. Maybe there's some kind of archive stuff on there, but it's all kind of, it's not been updated because I nicked the ship. So it's not been preserved in any way by the university. I've just tried to keep it running the best I can, and it just doesn't work that well. And I think maybe the navigation logs are kind of very temperamental. But I think the thing that keeps me coming back to them is there are those coordinates to a place that do not or should not exist. And I'm convinced that maybe they are tied in some way to knowledge that the professor had about the Iron Gates that I'm still trying to unlock. So these coordinates will be kind of driving me crazy. What are they? What do they mean? Where do they lead? What will I find when I actually figure out where they go? So I'm just going to roll randomly to come up with another quirk of the starship. So let's roll up. Okay, 87. 87 says, strange symbols are scrawled on the deck and bulkheads in the main corridor. Yeah, sure, why not? What if those strange symbols were the work of the professor? What if they were kind of maybe driven slightly mad by this obsessive search for the Iron Gates? Maybe that's something they saw. Maybe that's something I've seen. Have I seen it in my dreams? The symbols? They're very familiar. Do they mean nothing? They're just there. That's why they're there. And I don't know the meaning behind them, but they mean something. Okay, so name our starship. What are we going to call our starship? Okay, we are just going to roll on the starship name oracle. All these random tables are called oracles, by the way, which leads to the phrase you'll see repeated through the book, which is ask the oracle. If you're not sure, ask the oracle. And some oracles are specific. They'll come up with like settlement names or ship names or motives for characters, stuff like that. But then other times you'll roll on things called the description oracle or the action oracle, and they'll just give you a couple of words maybe. And the idea is for you to interpret those words and see what they mean, even though they might really mean nothing on the face of it. It's up to you to dig around and find meaning in it to drive the story. So let's roll on the starship name generator. Okay, so 18, Eclipse. Eclipse is perfect. Eclipse is kind of generic, kind of what a university would call a ship, I think. Yeah, I like that. Captain of the Eclipse. That's the ship we're running. Step 6 is to choose your final asset. Now, I've got 4 options here. I can pick a module, which is a way of upgrading your ship. So I could perhaps give the Eclipse a medbay, or I could, improve its armaments. I could pick a support vehicle, which could be anything from a snub fighter to pop out the back of the ship and deal with incoming bogies, or a lunar buggy that will help me explore planets when I land on them. I can pick another path, which would be 3. That might be a bit too much, so probably going to not pick that one. Or I can pick a companion. Now, I have the aforementioned problem with animal companions, but I think it makes perfect sense for me in the role that we've come up with, working in an exploratory vessel, to have what is called a survey bot. So that's going to be a little floating bot that goes around and might do a few scans for me, help me ascertain whether things are dangerous, might do some analysis for me, but that's all they can do. They can't fight, they can't do anything else. I mean, I'm sure I'll end up breaking it or killing it, but that's what I want, a survey bot. I think my character is going to be relying a lot on their wits, and they're trying to be prepared and knowledgeable, and I think a survey bot makes perfect sense to go along with that. Let's give it a name. So what are we going to call the survey bot? What if we find out what the name of the institute was that I used to work for, and maybe that's what's printed on the bot, and maybe some of it's rubbed off, and whatever's left is what I call the bot. I think that's quite a cool idea. So let's roll on the table and see what we come up with. So 69. Nice. 69 gives us the name Griffin. Okay, so the Griffin Institute is what I worked for. And let's say the end of that's rubbed off and my little survey bot is called Griff. Yeah, that sounds good. Little me and Griff. What's Griff like? I think Griff is like the ship, very functional, not aesthetically pleasing. He doesn't look like he's been designed by Apple. It's not an elegant design. It's boxy. There's wires sticking out, maybe. It's kind of basic, maybe a bit unreliable, maybe doesn't work all the time. He tries his best, but yeah, Griff. Looks a little bit like a kind of boxy toaster that flies. It flies alongside, but it's also maybe got kind of Wall-E style tracks that can come out the bottom, and he can rumble along beside me when he's tired of flying. Yeah, Griff, the caterpillar tracked flying toaster. I like that. That's who's going to come along on this adventure with me. Step 7 is to set your stats. Now, I'm not going to get too much into the mechanics of this game. I will say it is based on the Powered by the Apocalypse system. If you've ever played a game like Apocalypse World or Monster Hearts or Dungeon World or Monster of the Week, any of those games, the Root RPG, anything like that, you will be familiar with that system. It is kind of like an extrapolation. It takes it forward and advances that system in very interesting ways. But I'm not going to get too much into that. But what we will do is set the stats now. Okay, we have 5 stats. The first is Edge, which is your speed, agility, and perhaps how good you are at range combat. We have Heart, which is a kind of like catch-all term that includes courage, willpower, empathy, sociability. We have Iron, which is kind of your physical strength, your endurance, how good you are at fighting up close with your fists or like with melee weapons or whatever. We have Shadow, which is how stealthy you are, how sneaky you are, also how deceptive you are, how cunning you are. And lastly is Wits, which is your powers of observation, perception, knowledge, your expertise, that kind of thing. So in Ironsworn, you are to give each of these a numerical value. You're going to give one of them, your strongest one, a 3. Then your next strongest ones, you're going to give 2 of them a 2. And then your weakest ones, you're going to have 2 stats that will be 1. Now, I'm going to do things a little different. Ironsworn is a hard game. the first time I played Ironsworn, I spent about 45 minutes making my character, and they died in 5 minutes because I tried to do something a bit too daring and basically got beaten to death by the lowest level bandit you can play in the game. Combat went a bit wrong, dice rolls went against me, and I got my ass handed to me in quick, smart fashion. It's hard, and it's interesting to play because when you play it, there is this temptation to kind of be really hard on yourself when you fail. And when that happens, it kind of compounds and compounds and compounds, and you can find yourself kind of stuck. I'm a little bit more experienced now that I probably won't do that, but as it's a solo playthrough, I'm going to use what's called the challenging stat array, which came in the Lodestar expansion to the original Ironsworn, which allows you to bump those stats up by 1. Now, it doesn't mean I will be succeeding all the time. I will be failing a lot in this game, an awful lot. And the mixed success, the kind of weak hit as it's called in this game, is still the most common roll. So there's always going to be complications and it's never going to be plain sailing. But in a solo game where I've got no other player to rely on, I feel like this will help skew slightly more towards success and not just kind of entering this spiral of misery, which can happen. And I think there's a part of it which is you probably shouldn't roll for everything, which, you know, is 100% true, but you can find yourself on a slippery slope if you don't build up your failures. If you don't start small and then get bigger as it gets worse, then you can find yourself in real trouble and it's hard to get out of. It's one hell of a tailspin. So let's quickly fill in these stats. I think my strongest stat is going to be wits. I think I'm going to be quite smart, so that's going to be my 4. I think I'm going to be pretty quick and nimble, so that's going to have a 3. I think I'm going to be pretty stealthy as well, so I'll have a 3 in that. So I'm good at getting in and out of places without being seen. And then I think my weakest stats are going to be iron. I don't think I'm much of a fighter up close. And heart. And I don't think it's because I'm not charismatic or I'm not empathetic or not sociable. I just think that I've been on my own a long time, and perhaps these days those kind of things don't come easy to me. I don't want to psychoanalyze this made-up person too much, but yeah, I think those are their stats, and I'm sticking to them. Okay, so we're going to do step 8, which is set your condition tracks. This is a mechanical thing, so we're going to skip past this now, but they're tracks that basically measure your overall health, your mental health, and your supply, and also something called momentum, which we'll explain when we start playing. Again, there's not going to be any explanation at all in this or the next episode about how to play the game. You will all learn along as I play. Okay, step 9, envision my character. What do they look like? How do they act? And what do they wear? Right, the look. I think this character is a Caucasian male. So I think he looks older than he is. I think he's probably someone who's in his kind of mid to late 30s, but looks at least 10 to 15 years older. I think time's been hard on him. His dark hair is peppered with grey and is white at the temples. I think he's got kind of a aged, lined face, a heavy beard. I think he probably could have been handsome once. I think possibly if he got the Queer Eye treatment, maybe if the Fab Five spruced up the Eclipse, gave Griff a bit of a polish, give him a new wardrobe, he might be sharp, but I think those days are gone. And he kind of looks a bit haunted. He's been out here alone for a long time, but he's trying his best. You know, what can you do? How does he act? I think he's someone who doesn't rush into situations. I think he's analytical. I think he is considered. But when he does act, he acts decisively, quickly. He's someone who will, in a social situation, stand back and watch. And whilst he has confidence, it's something that he would probably rather use second after his powers of observation. And what does he wear? Well, I think he's got a pretty sick double-breasted leather jacket, also orange. I think he has kind of like a multi-functional goggle/respirator all in one combo that he puts on when he leaves the ship to go out and explore things and delve the depths. I think he's fairly lithe. I think he travels light. I think he has a satchel that he carries. I don't think he wants to load himself up with lots of equipment, even if he is out in the field. I think he wants to get in, get out, get what's needed, and move quickly, move efficiently, and not put himself in too much danger. So I think that's how they appear. Step 10, name your character. Okay, going to give him a name. Now, I'm going to be 100% honest and say that I picked this name before I even pressed record. And I picked this name because I was flicking through the book and I happened upon the names oracle and was just idly looking through, and I didn't even see one name. I saw two names that were entries, one after the other, and they were both surnames. And I thought, wow, they sound cool together. I'm going to call my character this. And those names were Archer and Barlow. So my character's name is Archer Barlow, which I think is a very cool sounding name for a very not cool character. So I just like the way that sounded. So that's the name, Archer Barlow. Okay, we're also going to give our character gender pronouns. Archer Barlow is a he, him. The last option in naming the character is to give them a call sign. Call sign is how spacers are typically known rather than by their family names. I don't think that it would be too appropriate for Barlow to have a call sign, but I think it would be funny or interesting if maybe some other characters gave him a call sign and it wasn't something that was particularly flattering. And the reason I'm thinking that is looking down the list of options, there is one that is just book. And I wonder if like another grub or some scavengers or like, you know, some ne'er-do-wells saw him reading a book once and then, hey, you fucking nerd. You're reading a book. Who reads books? And now they kind of use it to try and mock him, even though he's like, oh, I read books. I'm clever. So what? But he just doesn't fit in that world. He doesn't fit in with the oily rags of the universe. He is a man out of place, and they don't let him forget it. So yeah, book. So Archer Barlow, known to some as book, and he hates being called that. He hates it. So yeah, that's his call sign. Okay, step 11, gear up. So gear in Starforged and things like encumbrance and inventory are abstract concepts. You have a number that goes from 0 to +5. +5 is you have everything you need. 0 is you're out and you need to resupply, basically. But we can give our character some specific items that will be used narratively. So, for instance, if I don't give my character a gun and he gets into a firefight, there's not really a great deal he can do about it. So let's figure out any key kit that he has. So obviously I've got my mask, respirator, goggle combo. I like that. My satchel. I think I do have a sidearm, a pistol. I think it would be cool if he had one kind of down on his thigh and it had like a weirdly long barrel, like what a gun would look like with a long silencer on it, possibly. Maybe it allows him to stay at a distance more. Maybe it's got a slightly longer range. Again, range is an abstract concept in this. There's no like grids or anything, but maybe narratively it will help me kind of keep myself a bit more at a distance. I've got this vision of like having a staff, a bit kind of like a walking stick maybe, but it's also kind of multi-purpose. Maybe it can be a kind of a tripod. Maybe it can be kind of something that can take samples if I dig it into the soil. Maybe it splits into two and each half becomes like a flashlight or, you know, a kind of a flare or fighting sticks, you know, something that's, it's kind of, it has utility that can be used in lots of different ways. So it's kind of staff. I don't know what I'll call it. A space poker. That's what we'll call it. Yeah, fine. And that's our gear. And with those 11 steps complete, our character is finished. And so very much is this episode. I'm going to split this session 0 into 2 parts. This part saw us build the world and build the character. The next session, we're going to do 2 things. We're going to create a starting sector, which is going to be the area of the forge where we begin our adventure. We're going to populate it with settlements, planets, and dangers, and that'll be a lot of fun. The other thing we're going to do is create a connection. The connection is an important relationship with a non-player character that we will use for driving the story forward. I do hope you have enjoyed listening along to me putting the pieces of this story together. I really love how you start with nothing but prompts and snippets of ideas and end up with all these possibilities to explore. And honestly, it's why I love this game so much. I also hope you enjoyed the bit of flash fiction at the start of the episode, which was generated in the same way as everything else. I just rolled a couple of times on the oracles, and that's what I wrote based on the prompts. Please smash the thumbs up button like there's no tomorrow, and also subscribe if it's your first time here. Also, maybe click the little bell so you get notified when there's a new episode out. Why not? Rude not to. Until next time, I bid you farewell and safe passage.